Okay, welcome back everyone. And today we have to discuss the two sample problems that are still outstanding, and both the problems concern fluid statics, right? So for the first problem, we have to observe that the generalized equation that we had discussed, which was minus delta p plus rho g equal to 0, that is missing here, for 1D reduces to this particular form, okay, dp dz equal to minus rho g, where z is counted from a datum up and gravity is going down, right? Okay, so by the way, what I've done is, because the two problems are quite extensive, I mean, if I had to work everything out, it would take a lot of time. So I've already written half the answers, and some of it I will just keep going filling, go around filling as we go along the class. Okay. So our gravity in this particular case is downwards, right? Okay. So now the equation of state for a gas is given by P, where P is the pressure, equal to rho R T. R is the gas constant, T is the absolute temperature. For our particular problem, we had said that there will be a linear decrease with height of temperature. So as we keep going up, temperature decreases. So obviously temperature is, let's say, maybe highest at the ground. That doesn't happen actually in reality, but let's not worry about that. We have conjured up this very simple linear relationship, T equal to T naught minus mz. Okay? So this is okay. So this is z goes up. So z, as z increases, T decreases. Okay. So these are the three things that were given to us. This is because of the one-dimensional nature of the case. This is given to you, and this linear decrease you have been asked to assume. Okay. So now if we combine these three equations, equations 1, 2 and 3, then what can we do? Then we can, in dp dz, we can replace rho with a pressure and RT term. So we can get a form for rho from here in equation 2 and plug it back into 1. Then you will also have a temperature T, for which you can use this particular expression right here. So you can plug this expression for T into 2, you can get an expression for rho in terms of the other variables and plug that back into equation 1, where you will end up with a nice differential equation. Okay, so what happens? And you have, so now you have dp equal to minus rho dz, and once you use equation 2, you end up with this particular form, and once you include the temperature equation, then you will end up getting, so this will become minus P G R T naught minus mz into dz, right? And what do you do with the differential equation? Well, there's not much you can do. You have to integrate, right? So what we do is, since there is pressure on this side, I'm going to bring this pressure onto the other side. So you have now dp by p, and now on this side you have the other terms left. So what are the other terms going to be? So this is now going to be g dz r t naught minus mz, right? So now if you integrate this, so let's say the pressure at 0 datum is P naught, and the pressure at Z is some P. So then on this side, when you integrate, you have log of P by P naught ln, obviously log to the base E, equal to, on this side you will have G, you will also have an M and an R, and then you also have a log on both sides, and in this case you will have T naught minus mz at the top. You'll also have a T naught minus mz, but on the bottom the value of z is 0, so this you'll just get as T naught. So now that you have this expression, you can, from here, it is not that difficult to see that this GMR actually should become a power of this, right? So what I can do is, I'm just going to this. So you can put this here, and then you can just take this entire expression here and put it to the power. Then you will have P by P naught is equal to T naught minus mz by T naught to the power g by mr. So you have essentially solved your equation, where basically this top part is, by the way, just T by T naught to the power g by mr. So now you have an answer for what P is right here. Okay, good. So this problem was rather straightforward to solve. Now we had the other problem where you had fluid in a cylinder. So this is the cylinder, and this is rotating in with an angular velocity of omega. Gravity again is downwards, and now we have to worry about what this profile looks like. Now the governing equation in this particular case comes out to be this particular form, which we had already discussed. This essentially, so by the way, okay, just a second, I'm just quickly going to go back. Now this particular form here, when we had said that this is equal to 0, let's say, this particular form here, this side essentially, some of you would have recognized this is actually a force term, and because it is static, the MA term is 0. Okay, so this particular term, and we'll come back to this a little bit more when we are discussing the Navier-Stokes equation also, is we'll see this form again, similar form, and that will be accounting, we'll be accounting for the force, and we'll be writing F equal to MA, right, all over again. But this is basically that. Okay, so this is a force term, and on this side you have 0. So this equation doesn't come out of magic. It's just force balance, but now you have written it for differential volume. So in this particular case, if the body is rotating with as an acceleration a compared to your inertial reference frame, then you have to add a fictitious force, or in this case, on this side you have a rho a bar term, where this is the acceleration of this non-inertial reference frame with compared to the inertial reference frame. Okay, so now we have to ask ourselves, what is this A? But before we find out what A, and we write down this expression in a little bit more detail, we have to ask ourselves as to what is the right coordinate system for our case. Is it the XYZ coordinate system, or is it the spherical coordinate system? Is it the cylindrical coordinate system, or some other? Well, of course, that's not the case. Here, it's sort of obvious that you have to work with the cylindrical coordinate system. So let's say we will denote the 3 coordinates as r, theta, z. Right? Now, if that is true, then immediately you can tell something about gr and g theta. So I now have to worry about this vector expression right here. So I have to worry about all the different terms for this. So g now has components in r, theta, and z, and a will have similar components. Okay. So now gr is 0, it's sort of obvious, right? And this is equal to g theta. Gz is equal to minus g. Okay? And whenever you are doing this, please be very careful about how z is this z is oriented. Z is oriented here, in this case going up. Okay, so this is the direction of z. Okay, so at least one of the expressions we now understand what we have to do. Okay, now again what we have done is, so I have already sort of cheated and looked into the book, figured out what the expression for the pressure, or sorry, what the expression for del is in cylindrical coordinates, and I have written it down here. Okay, so pressure is written in cylindrical coordinates. G, obviously everything else is missing, so only you have the k term. And then again for the other side where you have the acceleration of the reference frame, you have all these different terms. Okay, I've just realized this is small. Okay, now that's fine. Okay, the hat is at the wrong place here. The hat should be on K. Yeah. Okay, and sort of switched it. I've been writing E theta later, but anyway, that doesn't make much bit of difference. Okay, so now what we have to do is we have to figure out what are the values of AR, A theta, and AZ R. Okay, so these are the components for the acceleration. Now in this particular case, you are having just rotation along the axis, so A theta and AZ are 0, but not so AR. AR is actually equal to, if you remember your dynamics classes, it's equal to minus omega square r. So there is sort of a fictitious force which is trying to pull the body in, whereas, right? So that accounts for this. Great. So now what you can do is you can use this vector equation to write down the individual component form equations. So here you have del p del r equal to rho omega square r, del p del theta equal to 0, del p del z equal to minus rho g. So this three equations, which are the three separate partial differential equations governing p, suggest that p is a function of r and a function of z, but it's not a function of theta, right? So p here now can be considered as a function of only r and z. This was actually obvious at the very beginning of the class itself, because at the very beginning of the, when you are starting off with the problem, because there is this problem is axisymmetric in nature. Okay, now recollect what we had said about functions which are multivariable, right? So here pressure is dependent on r and z, so you have a multivariable function here. So the total derivative dp is now del p del r into dr plus del p del z into dz, right? So if I had to write, so all you now need to do is to look up and see what the expressions are and just sort of copy it, right? So if we copy this, then you will end up with rho omega square r dr minus rho g dz. Well, this is nice because this does seem to be integrable on both sides, right? So now we can take the liberty of going to the next step, which is simply take this particular form and this integrate. So let's say you have dp you are integrating from P1 to P, and you are integrating from some location R1 to R, and you have rho omega square R dr, and you are integrating some Z1 to Z. So you will end up with P minus P1. This is now become very, very straightforward for all of us, and that is now we haven't said what P1 is, right? So we just need to figure out a proper form. So let's just quickly go back to this diagram, and let's say that at the center, this particular height, let us say, is h1. Okay. Then at r equal to 0 and z1 equal to h1, we have P1 equal to P atm, the atmospheric pressure, right? So nicely, now our expression becomes P minus P atm plus rho omega square R square by 2 minus rho g z minus h1. Okay, so this is our equation governing pressure. But what was the actual question? The question was, how will you find the equation for this meniscus? So what happens at the meniscus? What is so special about the meniscus? Well, at the meniscus, your pressure is P atm, right? So at this free surface, or at the meniscus, P is always equal to P atm. So your left hand side is 0. So if you want to find the expression or the z values for the meniscus as a function of r, then all you need to do is to solve this equation. This is it. And the solution to this equation is your answer. So meniscus profile is given by this above equation itself. Okay, great. So I hope that has helped you out, and you had gotten the same answer by yourself, I am hoping. Okay, so now let's go back to our mathematical discussions. So we were discussing vectors, tensors, matrices, and all other things. And you can please go over chapter 2 by yourself of the book, and you will note that the way tensors and vectors have been described in the book are slightly different. But remember, they are all equivalent. Okay, so I have given you a slightly different perspective on tensors and vectors, which I feel are more intuitive and easier to understand, especially with regards to tensors, where you look at them as linear transformations from one Euclidean space onto another, onto itself actually. So that one Euclidean space to a different type of different set of vectors. So that it's very important to understand that these different techniques or different methods of explaining what vectors and tensors are, these are more or less all the same, and you are free to go over how the book does it. And we also have understood that our vectors in mechanics, vectors vectors can have arrows, But if you had to discuss, if you want to talk about it in more mathematical sense, then what it basically means is that the vectors can be thought of as a set of numbers in a column, right? So, or just a second, or equivalently, they can be thought of as a collection of numbers. And this vector, hence we can refer to it as in column format, and where these are the different components. These are the different components. Now, it's a matter of convention usually that most books and most people usually use column vectors to express vectors in mechanics, whereas you could as well as do it in row form. But whatever form you are using, it's better to stick to that so that there is no confusion. Otherwise, it basically affects the way you write some of the expressions. So sometimes you'll see that there are minor variations in the way the expressions themselves are written. Okay. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. While we are on this particular topic, we also discussed tensors, and in our case, for the kind of vectors, the column vectors we are dealing with, your tensors will be like matrices. So you'll have numbers a11, a12, a13, etc., etc., and this is sort of the matrix represents your tensor, and this can be written as aij, where this I denotes the row and j denotes column. And we also looked at how you can multiply vectors. There are multiple ways of doing it. The dot product is especially very interesting, and it is also very easily generalizable. So we looked at how you can do dot product of a vector with another vector, a vector with a tensor with a vector, and we wrote down in the tensor notation, the integral notation, we wrote down the different expressions for them. This one more thing while we are talking about different formulations. In physics, sometimes they use this to denote dot product, okay, denotes in the physics community, I mean, they use sometimes this particular form, but we will just be using this dot. This also denotes dot product. And there are all equivalent ways, okay? So denotes dot product. Okay. Now, when you go to the book, you will find that the reason we are discussing tensors is because what will happen is there are certain quantities that will be very important to us, especially stress, which becomes a tensor. So we have stress, which will be one of the most important tensors we'll be dealing with. And the reason stress and the way the stress relates to two vectors is in the sense, and I'm going to here, I'm just copying an equation that is there in the book itself, and there in the book it says, so it uses this particular form. Or in the other notation, what it will do is it uses, so in the dot product sense, it uses this other expression, and you can immediately see that the reason this tensor is important is because it relates force with a unit vector. But the unit vector actually denotes an area, okay, or the orientation of an area. So this unit vector n is an area that is being denoted. So, and these are differential elements, of course. So the stress tensor is important because given a certain plane, it gives you the force that is there. One more important thing here is, and this we will not cover right now, but there are different books which use. So here, the way these two indices are used, it often depends upon the person to. It varies from person to person on what tau ij exactly represents, and hence there are sometimes differences in notation between different books. So it's just important to keep some of this into mind. Anyway, we are not discussing stresses and how to figure out forces right now, so we'll not bother with it so much. But that's just something to keep in mind. Yeah. Okay. Uh, the important another important thing which I have not covered so much, but which is important, is the idea of eigenvalues and eigenvectors. And the idea is simple. You have probably encountered this yourself sometime, that if a scalar lambda and a non-zero vector, this is very important that the vector be non-zero, vector x, they satisfy the equation a x equal to lambda x, where A is a matrix or a tensor, okay, then lambda is called the eigenvalue of A. And x is the eigenvector of A corresponding to lambda. Okay. If you club all the eigenvalues of A, so A can have multiple eigenvalues, and if you club all of them, that is called a spectrum. And this matrix A is called singular if and if only if 0 is one of the eigenvalues. The reason these are important is because we often deal with eigenvalues and eigenvectors in mechanics. Specifically, we often deal with symmetric matrices, and we know that symmetric matrices are matrices where A transpose is equal to A. And there are theorems which will tell you that all eigenvalues of a real symmetric matrix are real, and all eigenvectors corresponding to these distinct eigenvalues are orthogonal. We are not really going to see much of eigenvectors and eigenvalues, and so I don't want to deal with it too much, but it was there in the book, so I thought I'll just talk about it for a minute here. But the more important portion that we have to deal with are the integral theorems of vector analysis. And these theorems are important because these theorems tie in vector calculus and integral calculus. So I'll just take myself a new page. So, integral theorems of vector analysis. And these theorems are important because, as I said, they tie together differential calculus and vector calculus, and integral calculus rather. And there are three very, very important theorems. They are Green's theorem, Gauss's theorem, and Stokes' theorem. I believe the book does not discuss Green's theorem. I might be wrong, but you can take a look again. I think Gauss's and Stokes are mentioned, but Green is not. And these are extremely important because they apply to many physical applications, including electricity, magnetism, hydrodynamics, heat transfer, etc. And interestingly, Green's theorem, it is said that it was discovered around 1820s, and it arose in connection with potential theory, which includes gravitational and electrical potentials. Gauss's theorem, which is also called the divergence theorem, arose in connection with study of capillarity, It is also said that there was a Russian mathematician who discovered the theorem at the same time as Gauss, Ostrogradovsky, and he does not get enough credit for his work. But anyway, that is something we'll leave to the historians to figure out whether how much credit he deserves. And the Stokes theorem, interestingly, it was first supposedly suggested by Stokes in a letter to Lord Kelvin in 1850. And basically around the 1800s, between 1820s to 1850, we have some very important developments that have happened in this area. So let's see, the first important thing we want to look at is Green's theorem. And the first thing we have to understand before we go dive into Green's theorem is the idea of a closed curve bounding a simple geometry or simple elementary region. So let's say you have a region and it is bounded through a curve. Okay, so this is my region, and let's say this region, we'll call it D. And for the time being, we'll call this curve as C. Okay. So C is a closed curve and we'll assume that the region is simple and there are no holes at the moment, and that C is continuous. Okay, C1 continuous. Sorry, C0 continuity. You don't need C1 continuity right now. So the curve is closed. Now, when you have a curve bounding a region, and you want to traverse this region through the closed curve, there are two ways you can go about it. One is you can obviously go via the counterclockwise direction. Okay. And this direction of being counterclockwise, will denote it by C plus. So C plus is the counterclockwise or the positive direction. And if you go the other way, so here if you just check it. So if you go the other way, which is the clockwise direction, okay, then you traverse the curve in a negative sense. Okay, so this is your clockwise, sorry. And negative. Okay. It's important to agree on the orientation of the curve, because you'll see that it makes a little bit of difference in the results. So once we have figured out that there is a continuous curve, whereas Gauss's theorem is actually uses two different mathematical results, and the first one is, so maybe I'll just call it lemma 1, and that is that, oh, just a second, let P be a function in 2 dimensions in this particular case of class C1. Okay, so P is a function of class C1. You don't have to worry too much about what C1 here means. It's basically the first derivative is continuous. You can just think of it like that. So this is these are continuities. So C0 is it implies 0th order continuity, and then C1, C2, C3, etc. So it's a continuous function and its derivative exists. So in that case, the proposition is that if you want to consider this particular integral, or basically the line integral of p dx along this curve c plus, then this is equal to del p del y dx dy. So this particular one dimensional integral is equal to this area integral, where now you have del p del y, and now you have integrated it over the entire domain. Okay. We're not going to go into the proof of this, but the other lemma will be that imagine q is a similar function, it's a different function, then so q is a C1 function, then q, I'm not being very mathematically rigorous, by the way, so I'm sure if a mathematician is looking at this, they won't like it. Okay, so okay, this is the other lemma, that if you take this integral over this closed curve, where you have traversed the curve in the positive or the counterclockwise sense, then this is equal to del q del x, and then this is over the domain D. Okay. The negative sign does not occur here because reversing the rows of x and y corresponds to a change of orientation for the plane. Okay. So the negative sign goes away. Now Gauss's theorem, okay, if you add the two lemmas, so Gauss's theorem says, sorry, not the Gauss's theorem, sorry, I'm sorry, that's a mistake. Green's theorem. Gauss's theorem will come next, or a little bit later. Maybe we'll discuss theorems, Stokes first. But Green's theorem says that let D be a simple region, and P and Q, and P comma Q be C1 continuous, be of C1 class. By the way, this C1 here is different than this C plus, okay? So don't confuse this with this. This is the closed loop, this is C1 continuity. Then the following result holds, and that result is P dx plus Q dy equal to the integral over the entire domain of del q del x minus del p del y dx dy. Great. So this becomes the important theorem, and you can sort of see why it is so important.